Hello, my fellow parliamentarians. I will be discussing the proper parliamentary procedure. I have 3 documents that I will be showing, and each of the 3 documents will be provided to you by Ms. Gilliard. The first document is my basic agenda. It is just a brief overview of what each step will be in parliamentary procedure. The first step is calling the meeting to order. This is done by the President. If the President is absent, the meeting can be conducted by the Vice President. Number 2 is roll call. It's typically done by the Vice President. It's just where they state the names of the attendees. Then will be number 3, the reading and approval of minutes by the Secretary. If the Secretary cannot attend the meeting, the minutes will be submitted before the meeting to the Club Advisor, Ms. Gilliard. The President will appoint an officer to read the proposed minutes from the previous meeting. If you do not have a secretary yet, or if your secretary has not yet started recording the minutes, then this step would just be skipped, but that is when it would be happening. Number 4 is the reports of officers. This is where the President, Vice President, and Reporter and Treasurer give their reports. The Treasurer will not have a report until they have access to the finances. And you as a parliamentarian will not typically have a report to give either. Number 5, reports of committees. This is done by committees' chairs. This step can be skipped if the committees are not yet formed, or you can use this time to form your committees. Number 6 is standard order of business. This is when the club talks about the execution of approved motions. This time can also be used as committee work time or as time to discuss community service opportunities. It's really a time for your club to do what is most important to you. For example, if you want to go over your community service opportunities, this is a great time to discuss it. After standard order of business, it would move to number 7, announcements. This is when it's time for each member to have a chance to talk about any important announcements or changes. If there are no announcements, then it would move to adjournment. And once the announcements are done, it moves to adjournment. Adjournment is just where the meeting ends. My next document is the detailed agenda. It gives a more descriptive outline of each step in parliamentary procedure. So as I said earlier, the first step is calling the meeting to order, which is done by the President. When the President calls the meeting to order, they must state, "I now call this meeting to order." And the meeting will officially begin. This is when the Secretary will start recording the minutes. Roll call, typically done by the Vice President. This is just where the Vice President will read the names of the attendees. This will be recorded in the minutes. Then number 3, which is the reading and approval of minutes, which, as I said earlier, if you do not have a secretary or if your secretary has not yet started recording minutes, this step would be skipped. But if your secretary has recorded the minutes, and if you do have a secretary, then this would be when they go over the most important things that happened in the last meeting. If there were any motions made, it would be in there. The attendees would be in there. Any important announcements would be in there. Everything that was important in your last meeting will be in the Secretary's minutes. And if you would like, you can read all that I have written about the reading and approval of the Secretary's minutes. And by approval of the minutes, this is when the President will ask if anything was left out or if the minutes needed to be corrected. This is the discussion before a motion is made to approve the minutes. Once discussion has ended, the President will ask if someone will move to approve the minutes. This is one time where discussion will happen before a motion to approve minutes, because it is a limited discussion. That just means that if there's nothing wrong with your minutes. There's not going to be a whole lot of discussion happening. And once the motion has been made, a different club member must second the motion, and then the president will call a vote by all in attendance. Majority is needed to approve the minutes. Then number 4, the reports of officers, which is the president, vice president, treasurer, and reporter. This is when officers will state recommendations for what needs to be done or completed and will move on to motions. One club member must agree by making a motion in agreement. Then a second motion must be made by a different club member. The president will open the floor for discussion. Any club member can make a motion to end discussion, or the president can call for a vote if productive discussion has ended. The president will conduct a vote, and the recommendation proposed by the officer is adopted or not adopted. Majority wins. The treasurer, like I said, will not have a report until they have access to finances, and you as the parliamentarian will not typically give a report. And this is a rule of order tip. Respect will be shown to all members of the club. A speaker will not be interrupted until they have finished their points. The only exceptions to this rule are the advisor interrupting for an emergency or any inappropriate behavior, the parliamentarian interrupting if Robert's Rules of Order are not being followed correctly. That just means if parliamentary procedure is not being followed the proper way, or if clarity is needed. Then would be number 5, reports of committees. And like I said, if your committees are not yet formed, then you can skip this step or use this step to form your committees. But this is when your committee chairs would give their reports. Standard order of business, number 6. This is when the club talks about the execution of approved motions. It's basically just the time for all of you guys to discuss any important things. If you want to use this time to talk about community service opportunities, you can do that. If you want to use this opportunity for all club members to make any necessary motions, that's fine. It can be used however your club needs it to be used. Then after that has been done, you would move to number 7, announcements. This is a time where each member will have a chance to talk about any important announcements or changes. This is a chance for each member. If there are no announcements, then you would move to adjournment, but you would only move to adjournment after the announcements have been made. If there's no further business to be presented or discussed, the meeting will be adjourned. A motion must be made to adjourn the meeting. My third and last document. This is tips and language of making motions. I find this document very helpful, and hopefully you will too. The tips are, the club meeting will follow a set agenda. That is basically what I just showed you guys. Like in the basic agenda, they'll just follow this: call to order, roll call, reading and approval minutes, reports of officers, and so on. Then any club member can make a motion or second a motion. That just means you don't have to be an officer to make a motion or second a motion. A motion is a topic under discussion, and you can only discuss one motion at a time. That means you will not be discussing 2 or 3 motions all at once. It's one at a time. Everyone has the right to participate in the discussion. That means every club member can be participating in the discussion. You don't have to be an officer. Everyone has the right to know what is going on at all times. Respect will be shown to all members of the club. A speaker will not be interrupted until they have finished their point. And like I said, the only exceptions are if the advisor is interrupting or if the parliamentarian is interrupting because Robert's Rules of Order is not being followed correctly. Now the language for making motions. The normal order of how a motion would go is there'd be a motion, then the motion would be seconded, then there'd be a discussion on the motion, and then the motion would come to a vote. If you want to bring up a new idea to the club, you need to ask to be recognized by the president. For virtual meetings, which is basically all of our meetings, you would just use the raising hand icon tool, or you could type in chat and ask for the president to recognize you. And then once you're recognized by the president, you present your motion. And then once you've made your motion, you say, Then once you've presented your motion, a second is required for your motion to be discussed or considered. This means that someone has to second your motion. It can be any club member. If you do not receive a second, your motion is dead and does not continue to discussion. That means if no club member says, I second your motion, then it is dead. It is no longer being talked about, it's over. If you have heard enough discussion, if the motion gets moved to discussion and you've heard enough discussion, you would say, I move to close the debate. This stops the discussion and moves to voting. This can be done by any club member. So if any club member is done with the discussion, they just say, I move to close the debate. Once the debate is closed, it moves to voting. And if you want any more tips on the making of motions or on parliamentary procedure, this is a really good document. And when it comes to voting, the majority always wins. Even if it's won by one person, that just still means majority wins. So if nobody agrees, if you go on and your motion gets seconded, but when it goes to vote, you only get 3 votes for it, then it doesn't happen. Your motion just is basically dead. That is all of my parliamentary procedure documents. If you have any questions, I will be happy to answer them. Thank you so much for watching my video.